it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome back to Her Success Story. This month, we're actually specializing in doing a series around high performance. So we're interviewing women with backgrounds that revolve around high performance being sports or the performing arts or the arts in general. Today's guest, I think you're going to find fascinating. Crystal Lee is a VP of recruitment for Searchmasters, specializing in placement for the world of accounting, HR, real estate development, and legal. So before Crystal became a recruiter, she had a background in accounting, in public accounting actually, for over 12 years. She was a tax manager. She focused on helping high net worth individuals with their tax compliance and planning needs while heavily participating in firm growth via recruiting. Her love of recruiting had brought her from the University of San Francisco and her background in San Francisco, where she worked for many years, to the New York area, where I had the beautiful benefit of meeting and becoming friends and colleagues with Crystal over the last couple of years. When I heard her give a presentation just the other day, I was like, oh my goodness, please, please, please come on the High Performance series, because I had no idea that you had such a performance background. And I was floored, and I was like, oh my goodness, we've got to do this. We've got to record this like right now. So we jumped right in here today. I'm totally excited. So let me share a little bit, or actually it's Crystal, I'm going to welcome you in and you share a little bit of this background. So you're a numbers girl, you're a tax accountant, and you've been doing that piece for 12 plus years.
Right.
You moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, migrated, and now just share a little bit with me. You have a performing arts background.
Right.
What in the world is that about? I had no clue, as we've had coffees in the mornings, cocktails in the evenings. You floored me, so let it out of the bag here.
Well, I was classically trained in ballet. I made it all the way to point. I started from the age of 5 all the way through 11. I was doing ballet and jazz. I started jazz a couple of years later, but all still within elementary school, middle school time. And from there, I guess there was always that kind of competitiveness. Because I did continue dancing throughout high school, but it wasn't with the dance school. I just joined the dance club on campus at the high school. I was also a JV volleyball player. I was the setter for the team, as well as I was on varsity badminton playing mixed doubles. In my first year, I was ranked number 3, and then in my last year I was the number 1 mixed doubles couple for my badminton team, and all throughout that time I continued to dance. After college, I wanted to continue dancing, and I happened to be on a client across from what's now, or it might have changed already, but back then it was a ballroom class that was taken over by Cheryl Burke. It was a ballroom studio, but I started salsa dancing there, more hardcore. It was something that I knew because they made us kind of learn this stuff when we were in Spanish class and whatnot. So I joined, and after auditioning for a salsa team, I joined Symbolic Mambo, which is known for mid to low level lifts and tricks, along with salsa footwork. And that's when I started competing. And I entered a solo competition there. And I took 4th place. And Ivy, I remember you wanted me to talk about my medals. I was in this 4th place curse for a while. Couldn't break top 3. The first time around, I expected it because I was going up against 2 directors of, one was my former director, one was a director of another team. And then like one of these girls that like was just, you know, always like out on the dance floor, like with her amazing footwork. So I expected to take fourth in that one. And and then I went
So
to the
hold on,
county fair, got fourth there.
It's so funny. I have to jump in here for a second. So,
Yeah,
okay, so yeah, I had this dance background, but I also, and I did some sports and so
right.
I was an active kid, right? I was involved.
Yes,
You know, after college, I see the salsa studio. I'm like, hey, I remember doing a little bit of that. I'll play again, right? I'll play again.
right.
This will be my activity after work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And well, the first time I found fourth place acceptable, the first
Right.
time I'm
Right.
competing, I found fourth place acceptable. But I
Right.
got a couple of fourth place medals and I'm like, what the hell? Wait a second.
Right.
Just because these people own studios, I should be, you know, and so where did you go from there? Because
So yeah, like, you know, I entered the county fair, got fourth place there, but I was the only solo performer for that competition. So I really deserved fourth place, so to speak. But from there, you know, like when I moved out here, I had stopped doing salsa for quite some time. I moved on to another dance, but we'll pass on sharing that one. Um, but you know, like I hit somewhere in my early 30s, and I'm like, you know what, I really want to see if I still have it. And I went over to a Fred Astaire ballroom and met my instructor, who is this like surprisingly like tall partner for me, which is hard for me to find. And I'm like, you know what, let's do this. We practiced for 2 months and went in straight to the competitions, into the heats, and I medaled there in silver, which was awesome because like when they first announced me for a different match, like, or a different heat, I got fourth place. I'm like, oh, here we go again. And then like for another heat, got I actually got silver, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we broke the curse. So yeah, I was really proud because once again, like we only practiced for 2 months, and I'm like, all right, let's do this, like let's hit the floor. And it was the first time where like, you know, I entered one of those competitions where like there was a number on like someone's back, or I think it was on my partner's back. It was a pro-am comp.
so how do you see, you know, clearly you have a competitive streak.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And
I
I'd
do.
love to talk about that because as
Mm-hmm.
a recruiter, one of the things you do is a bit of sales. And you know, we talk a lot about the background in performance and leadership. So I think I'd love to touch on of how you see your background and it's helped you today as a leader. And then where
Yeah.
does this competitive edge come in? That's clearly sitting here.
So as a leader, you know, what I found is that dance really taught me to be a performer right from the get-go, right? And so you're constantly giving yourself to the audience. And I've carried that with me throughout my entire career. You know, like when I was in my firm, FFF, as a tax manager, like everybody that I saw like come in or brought in, you know, I wanted to make sure that they transitioned from being a professional or being from college into being a professional. And what happened there was, you know, I was always making sure that I was in a sense like performing like and being that role, that leader for them. And being on stage kind of makes you somewhat fearless about, you know, just like taking on that leadership role when maybe like everyone else might be too shy to step up. And obviously like also performing, you can learn also how to be like loud and proud. So you know, like I was one of those that I've always looked out for the people that I brought in. So like, you know, when opinions were asked, like, hey, like, how do we want to run this? Or like, hey, what did you guys think about this? What could we do? Like, I was always one to contribute, like, to the conversation. And
So you
a
learned
lot of
early
that.
on, even as a younger, you know, few years out, to speak
Right.
up, to
Right.
participate.
Exactly.
There's many people in their 20s as they're building their corporate leadership and
Right.
building their corporate presence that are in a
Hmm.
lot of meetings and find it very difficult to speak up and speak out.
Yes. Yes.
And that's something you took from your performance ability and said, okay,
Absolutely.
as a performer, I had to play loud and proud. At
Right.
any meeting, it's my responsibility to speak up.
Exactly. Exactly. As when it comes to the competitive edge, like I don't really like remember it being that significant in terms of like my career. Like where I see it to kind of come into play was more so like just competing with myself. Um you know, I was in a profession that was not 9 to 5, right? So like, you know, I'm like, okay, you know, like when I was doing dance, like I was working and having extracurriculars like after work. So especially like when I joined Symbolic Mambo, we would practice like two, I think it was like 2 weekdays. And so I would be either at the dance studio or at the dance club because part of our training was to go out there and social dance. So I was maybe going home at like 1 in the morning and then going back to work, like, you know, like first thing the next morning. So with that, it was just kind of like competing with myself, like, you know, I got this, I got the energy, I can wake up and just like keep going. So in that sense, like that's more so like where I see the competition. Like I never felt the need to like compete with my coworkers or compete like, you know, to like make it to the top. I was always one of those that I'm like, okay, if I do a really good job and so long as like, you know, I voice and validate what it was that I've accomplished, that my employer will take care of me.
So I
So
think that's this is a really important comment here that I don't just
mhm.
want to pass over,
Uh-huh.
is the point of making sure you voice your accomplishments.
Hmm.
Because so many people do great work and they're waiting
Right.
to be acknowledged.
Right.
Um, One of your mottos of playing loud and proud is voicing. I know, because I love that phrase, is
Yeah.
truly voicing out there
Hmm.
that I've accomplished this. Yes, I've highlighted this. So in the same way, when you go to compete or you're on stage or
Right.
however you want to look at it, is, you know, you put your arms out and you take your bow and you
Right.
own that moment. Is
Exactly.
that's what you're doing, is
Hmm.
making sure you're voicing, right? Taking
Right.
your bow, your curtsy
Hmm.
at the completion of, you know, something you've accomplished and letting
Right.
everybody know.
Exactly. And something to really kind of condense it into a phrase. Um, as much as when you're performing, you might think the world centers around you, but really, your bosses don't know, and they don't always think about you. So you have to remind them about what it is that you achieved. Like, you know, I was very thankful for like my bosses previously because they always acknowledged like the accomplishment that I made by bringing in so many like great staff that stayed with them for years. Several of them are still there. And, you know, I really prided myself on that. And I do it not because I'm looking for that gratitude, but it's nice, right? Like, you know, when you perform like as big and as loud as you want to, even when there's only like one person in the audience. Like I had a salsa class that I was giving in the local community garden, and I think like only about 3 people showed up. One of them showed up with a kid. I'm like, all right, pass me the baby, pass me the kid over, and I taught with the kid in my arms, like while the so that mom can participate, so that the others can participate as well, and you know, like no matter if there's one or many, like you just like do it.
So no matter what, it's about showing up.
Right, right,
And it's not how big or small your audience is. It's, as a performer, it's your responsibility to show up.
right,
And when we look at business that way,
right.
it doesn't matter if you're going for the huge promotion to the C-suite, or you want to share that you've completed a great project.
Right.
Okay. It's
Right.
you show up and you own what you've done.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, no matter if I'm placing someone who is 2 years into their career or someone who's 20 years into career, I'm doing the same work. And like that is across the board.
Right. And so if you have a candidate as a recruiter today, that's who's a couple of years of experience versus your one with 20, for you, your background has taught you, right? You show up 100% because you're on stage. Every candidate you put through, every candidate you fight for, every candidate you put out for a great position, you're showing up as if you're dancing for the gold medal.
Exactly. Exactly. Very well put. You know, and sometimes you'd be surprised, like sometimes it's the one that has that 20 years of experience that needs the most, for lack of a better term, hand-holding. Because oftentimes if they're really great candidates, they probably don't interview like every other day or every other year. Like some of them probably haven't interviewed for like 10 years. And so they're a bit rusty. So you got to work that out. But yeah, like once again, like,
so they need to get out there and just go salsa dance, so to speak. Right? They need to, it's not about you don't go for the performance, you just go out and you dance and you dance and you dance and you use salsa, mambo, whatever it is, and then you're ready for the competition. And by brushing up, right? So let's say we haven't danced for a few years, you want to get out there and dance, really practice your interview skills, right? Own it, your delivery, your context. And then you can go for that potential.
And the great thing is that, you know, like, especially in the salsa community, it's not very big, but they tend to be like very welcoming and accepting. So there's a dancer, there's a partner there for you, no matter which level you're at. You just have to go back out there. Like I hadn't salsa, like social dance in a while, and it actually was one of our like network attendees that, like, you know, kind of brought me back out there. Marilyn Gibbs, like I know you probably remember Marilyn. And I'm like, you know what, if Marilyn, who has her own business, like full-time, more over 9 to 5, and she has a daughter, I'm like, if she's got that kind of schedule, I can definitely get myself like back out there. And so that's what I did, and we had a blast, and she got a chance to see me in my element, where as opposed to before, like, you know, it might have just been all talk.
So, you know what, let's look at this then. So when you go out there and you play in the things that you were involved in earlier in your life, okay, so whether it was, if you were an ice hockey player like Heather has been, whether, you know, one of our guests, whether you did tennis or whatever that might have been that when you were younger, here's the question, right? So when you bring this back into your life as an experienced business person, how do you leverage it? This all of a sudden, you know, I don't even know if I'm being clear, but I'm like seeing this so visually.
Right.
We go back to, so if I was to go back, and I do occasionally take a tap class, so if I go back and do other things I did when I was younger, is there business relationships that are already all of a sudden opened up here?
Absolutely. So something that I had been toying with, like in the last year or so, was using salsa as a way to teach people how to network, because I find that like a lot of the things that I was taught in salsa translated to like how people kind of present themselves in networking. So for example, we used to have to pull students aside and kind of give them dance etiquette, right? So if you're like super sweaty, you want to make sure, like, you know, like you bring a change of shirt. If are concerned that maybe that lunch that you had was still in your breath. You want to, like chew the gum for like the first 5 minutes and spit it out because you don't want gum when you're dancing, or like, have a mint or whatnot. So even though like those things seem more superficial, it matters. Like you don't want to go networking with like bad breath. Like you want to be able to make eye contact, same in dancing, especially with salsa, because it is a partner dance and you could be oftentimes in a closed position and a very close position.
Yes.
So like a lot of that etiquette that we learned in salsa dancing translates into how we meet people, introduce ourselves to people, because we dance in a giant circle. And we oftentimes, or I should say oftentimes, every time we had class, you would rotate partners throughout the class. And so you're constantly meeting new people and having to reintroduce yourself. And still, there's room, just like in networking today, there's room when you're working with a new partner to be helpful as well. So essentially, like a lot of times in business, you're dancing.
So Crystal, question for our listeners today.
Right.
If I were to ask you what tips or strategy or advice, what do you have for our leaders and our up and coming leaders to be able for them to reflect back on something they did early on and how to use,
right.
Is there a tip or a strategy that you could say, wow, think back of, you might have done this when you were as a kid in elementary, middle, high school, college. This might have even just been a hobby and that's okay. How can you take something like that and add it to your leadership repertoire today?
Yes, absolutely. So I recently visited the Friends exhibit in New York City in Soho. And it reminds me of an episode when Monica went to go see, hey, who is this girl that was stealing my identity? And they had to go to a tap class. And like she like Monica went there with Rachel and she was like, oh, like to the instructor, oh, I'm just watching. And like the instructor was like, you don't watch a dance class, you dance a dance class. So my tip out there for people is to just dive right in, get out of your head and just go do it. Like, sometimes it could be a bit consuming to think about all the things or over prepare. But at the end of the day, until you actually do it and dive right in, and like have a chance to learn from your mistakes, make mistakes, learn from them, you're not really progressing. You're just still in your head.
So take the action.
Exactly.
Awesome. Love it. Crystal, how can people learn more about you, reach out to you, people, especially people in the fields of accounting, legal, HR, tell us more about you and how you could be a resource to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the key areas that I recruit in, especially in accounting. The way you can reach me is you can definitely reach out to me by email. That's crystal@searchmastersny.com. I'm sure like we'll have a chance to put it out there for everyone. And
everything will be written in the show notes, guys. Don't worry and don't panic. How to write or spell things, it's all below.
And check me out on LinkedIn. I think I even have a link or two to my performances as a salsa dancer.
Oh, cool. That's going to be so much fun to check out.
Yes. And on LinkedIn, I'm Crystal J. Lee.
Crystal J. Lee on LinkedIn and Crystal Lee in New York City. Thank you for joining me here. Thank you for participating in the High Performance Series and sharing the impact of your background as a performer and how it's impacted you as a fabulous women leader today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ivy, and I hope to be a future resource for your listeners.
And listeners, remember, feel free to subscribe. We come into your inbox every Monday morning with new content, as well as comment. Let us know what you think of today's interview and other interviews. What else you want to hear. That's how we look for wonderful future guests, is by listening to our listeners. Thanks for joining us here today. See you next time.
To shine.